I think it's about time we open this box, don't you? Welcome back to FNAF Explained. Hey, hi, welcome back to the series. Today is a scary day, and you know why? Well, up until now, we've been covering some pretty easy stuff. I hope it seems that way to you too. I hope I've explained things in a pretty simple way. But now we come to a bit of a turning point. See, for the next 3 games or so, things are going to be a lot more complicated. After that, the difficulty kind of goes down a bit. But for the next little while, it's going to be a lot trickier to get through. I'm hoping to explain things simply, just as I have been so far, but it's a challenging thing to take up, and I'm not sure. It might take a little longer to get these episodes out, but I am still going to be doing my best to explain these things in a way that makes sense. And by the way, if you were watching MatPat's theories instead, you would have gone through considerably more episodes by now, and he would now be trying to convince you that FNAF 4 and all the games before it are just a dream. So just be glad that I am so much smarter than he is. Please don't hate me, that was a joke. And you know what, let's get to the game, because we have a lot to cover here. Alright, so as always, a quick little description before we begin. So in this game, you're not playing as a security guard anymore. I know, really changing things up here. You're playing as a child in their bedroom, which honestly is a much more creepy place to be in, but it's also one that horror uses a lot more often, so But it works really well in this game, and one thing Scott does really well in this game is he really focuses on sound. In the games before this, he had paid a lot of attention to sound and how it can be much more creepy than what you see, but in this game he really cracks down on that, especially because you're in a child's bedroom. There's a fair amount of potential there. So who are the animatronics you're against in this game? Well, they are the overly scary, overly toothy nightmare animatronics, which are somehow absolutely horrifying and absolutely goofy looking at the same time, but trust me, they're not as goofy looking when they attack you. So obviously there's a huge change in scenery here, but other than that, it's pretty simple. You're going through your bedroom, checking all the different exits. He has 2 doors for some reason, and his closet and his bed, checking to make sure no animatronics show up there, because somehow these animatronics have made their way into your house. How they got there, and what this means for everything that's come before this and is going to come after this, we will get to. So as always, a good place to start here is the 8-bit minigames. There's always going to be a bit of lore revealed in the actual game itself, and that becomes more so as the games go on. In the next game, there's almost no 8-bit minigames to be found, so this is kind of the last one where they're really used a whole lot, and because of that, you kind of have to dig a bit deeper. But for now, we still have the same old 8-bit minigames where you're playing as seemingly the same child you're playing as in the main game. So let's go through those first, because we've already kind of covered most of what happens in the main game. Actually, before we get to the 8-bit minigames, let me just quickly mention, so obviously you have your main 4 animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, as nightmare versions, but as the nights go on, eventually they're replaced by a Nightmare Fredbear character, who is based off of Golden Freddy, it seems, more on that later, and just Nightmare, who is just a pitch-black reskin of Nightmare Fredbear. Now, we'll get to why those characters matter, we'll get to why any of this matters very soon, but now let's head over to the minigames. I just figured I'd mention that first so we get everything out of the main game out of the way first. So each minigame starts with a little tagline that says, blank days until the party. It starts with 5, counts down to 0. Something bad happened when it reaches 0. At 5 days until the party, it's revealed that from your talking Fredbear plush, yes, you have a talking Golden Freddy plush. Don't know why that is, but we'll get to it. He reveals that you have been locked in your room again by him. Who him is, we'll get to. But you kind of wander around inside of your room, and then you just sit down and cry. So, great. Very engaging gameplay in this first minigame. As the minigames go on, you are repeatedly harassed by him, who is revealed to be your older brother, who was wearing a foxy mask for, like, the entire game. And he deliberately scares you by jump-scaring you, by attacking you from behind the TV, from under your sister's bed, all sorts of different areas, and he's just kind of a jerk. And so, because of this, it's revealed that you are absolutely terrified of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Why this is, again, will be explained as the minigames go on, but for now all you need to know is you're petrified of this place. One thing to note about said sister is that she never actually shows up in this game. Your sister is never found, which leads to some interesting fan theories later on, which I'll get to. I feel like I keep saying that, but trust me, we'll get to all of this. Where things get interesting is at 3 days until the party, where you're at a Freddy's restaurant. But this isn't one we've ever seen before, except in another 8-bit minigame from FNAF 3, where this is revealed to be Fredbear's Family Diner, where Golden Freddy and Springtrap originally came from, before they both got all gross and moldy. Someone has apparently left without you, leaving you stranded here, someone who knows you hate this place, probably your older brother. Fredbear, your plush, urges you to run, but you don't. If you run left, Fredbear says, "Don't go, remember what you saw?" And if you go right, a man in a Fredbear suit approaches, and Fredbear says, "Don't go, you know what will happen if he catches you." Again, so many questions raised and so few answers so far. But as for the last 3 games, things start to get pieced together later on, and I'm really excited to show you what this all means. At 2 days until the party, you're back at the restaurant, but this time you can leave, and it's revealed that the birthday party coming up is yours. The question raised here is, why are you going to Fredbear's for your birthday party if you hate it so much? Again, the minigame ends with your brother jump-scaring you, blah blah blah, and then we move on to 1 day until the party. In this one, it's very short. You're locked in the back room of Fredbear's Family Diner, where you're begging someone to let you out, but no one does. Your brother sucks. 0 days until the party. The last minigame in this entire game, where your brother and his group of hoodlums, his group of absolute heathens, grabs you, carries you over to Fredbear on the stage, mocks you, and then throws you into Fredbear's mouth. They know you're scared of this guy. They know you're terrified of him. They throw you into Fredbear's mouth, and he chomps down. Now, keep in mind, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie are not possessed at this point. That's basically confirmed. So why does Fredbear clamp down on you? Well, I believe, and this is probably the first thing we can solve here, it seems to be because, as we know from the last game, moisture loosens the spring locks, and this suit has a lot of spring locks in it, it's very dangerous, and he clamps down on you because the spring locks are unraveled. But after the bonus night 6, there's one more thing with this child, where you see Fredbear once again telling you he will put you back together. Scott Cawthon, what does this mean? Yeah, this obviously raises a whole bunch of questions, and we've been frustrated about this game for years, but today I want to start trying to really piece things together. This little guy has been... Oh, sorry, it's really sunny in here. This little guy has been the result of so much controversy, so much problems with this community. We've had so many questions raised because of this little 8-bit sprite, and it's ridiculous. I shouldn't have done that. I just decapitated him. Okay, there's a lot to talk about here. So, first thing that I feel like we should solve here is, are the Nightmare animatronics real? I mean, let's before we get to anything else, let's actually solve what the animatronics in this game mean from the actual gameplay. I feel like these days we're talking way more about the 8-bit minigames than the actual game itself, and I feel like that's why later on Scott decided to focus more on the actual game for telling lore, and not using 8-bit minigames nearly as much in the future. So, I think the first question we should probably answer is, are these nightmare animatronics real? Because the one thing that's really confusing is they're called nightmare animatronics, but it seems like they kill you. I mean, after all, they jump scare you, and you get a game over. So are these things actually nightmares, or are they real? Are they hallucinations? What are they? Well, there's a couple clues that definitely write off them being real animatronics. For one, there's just some supernatural elements that happen. For one, Foxy literally turns into a plushie. Two, other little small Nightmare Freddy plushies show up on your bed, and then just completely disappear when you flash a light at them. They don't run off the bed, they just, disappear. And little other things like that that really... I mean, Nightmare Fredbear appears in your bed, just his head, though. Just his head, none of his body. Just things like that that wouldn't work if these were real robots, no matter how advanced they are. So, they have to either be actual nightmares or hallucinations. So, what are they? Well, this is where we get to more speculation. This is where we get to less concrete answers and more... Well, it could be this. And this is a very controversial game, so I'm sure I'm going to get lots of comments telling me how I'm completely wrong, which I expect, and I will gratefully take. So, our first clue here is an Easter egg that sheds a whole lot of light on this. See, in the main game, when you look back at your bed, there is a small chance you'll see either a bottle of pills, an IV bag, or a vase of flowers next to your bed on your nightstand. Things that don't really make a whole lot of sense being in a normal bedroom, so much as in a hospital, especially the IV bag. That would never be seen in a normal room, and the bag of pills and vase of flowers would definitely make more sense to be in a hospital as well. For someone who's having to get better, who's having to recover, just really weird details like that. So it seems like this is all in the crying child's mind, in the form of possibly a comatose dream, or just a dream in general. After the scarring events he no doubt went through in Fredbear's, thanks to his brother, he's having hallucinations, and he's imagining things that aren't really there, these nightmare animatronics. Which means that this whole game technically doesn't place, which leads to the dream theory, which I'll get to later. Don't want to talk about that just yet. It's quite a handful. But we know that at least this game is not real. These animatronics are not real. This all seems to be happening in the mind of this child. So if that's the case, if none of this actually happens, then why is Scott trying to tell us this? I mean, if none of it really happens after the bite, what's the point? Who is this kid and why should we care? Well, if you just be patient. Now, I'm sure the first thing you're thinking of here is, wait.
Was that the bite of 87?
Is that the bite of 87? No, it's not. It's not. Okay, it's not. It's not. It's not. We know this isn't the bite of 87 because the first clue we get towards this is on the TV in your house. There's a show on called Fredbear and Friends, which takes place in 1983. Now, it could be a rerun 4 years later, but I don't think it is. And that's because of the other clues there are as well. I believe that in FNAF 2, for one, this very event is referenced. Take a look at this phone call from Phone Guy and see what he says.
We have one more event scheduled for tomorrow, a birthday.
One more birthday party before the entire place shuts down. Interesting. Weird how he mentions this and it's never brought up again. And how this game also takes place the exact same year, 1983. This could also explain why Golden Freddy is now out of commission. He bit a kid's head, he's dangerous, so they throw him out. They make him this little rotting old suit in the corner. And he's never seen again except for in FNAF 1 in your hallucinations and stuff. So yeah, 1983 is the date that we've all pretty much just kind of accepted. There are a couple things that don't make sense about it, but we basically now only have 3 more questions to solve in this first part of the video. Number 1, what did this kid see that was so important? See, it says in the minigames, remember what you saw, but what did he see? And why is that so important? The other question is, why is he so important? This is a very different change from the past 3 games. You'd think this kid means something, he's important somehow. And what happens to him, for that matter? And lastly, what's up with Fredbear? I mean, Fredbear literally follows you throughout a lot of these mini-games, whether taking place as a flower, in a sewer, Pennywise style. what's up with this plush? So I'm going to try and solve those questions one by one. First of all, what did he see? Well, see, there's a little Easter egg in one of these mini-games where you can actually see Purple Guy. Notice how he's been pretty much absent in this game so far? Yeah, well, that's for a reason. He does show up one time, and that one time, so you pay attention to it, where you see him stuffing someone into an animatronic suit. Mind you, this does not appear to be a murder. It seems like he's simply suiting someone up to go out and perform. It doesn't look like he's murdering someone, especially since the door is wide open. But this child sees that, and he thinks he's killing someone. And Scott posted in one of the teasers on his website, what's often seen in shadows can be easily misunderstood in the mind of a child, which seems to point to the fact that this is not really a murder. But the crying child can't distinguish between that fact, and so he thinks that this is, it is murder. It's a murder, but it's not. Second question is, why is this kid so important? Why do we care so much about his story? Well, one interesting theory, and I will say this is the true one, is that either him or his brother is actually the night guard of the other games. See, with the head injury he gets, it could explain why he has so many hallucinations in the other games. He might have gotten brain damage from the bite, or if it's his brother, it could be his guilty conscience. Now, those clues to support this theory are a bit shaky, and again, in the next game, I'll elaborate on this more and explain why this is the true theory and why one of them, won't say which yet, but one of them is the night guard from all the different games. But again, I'll have to explain that in the next episode because we don't quite have enough evidence to support it just yet. And honestly, same with the last question, what's up with Fredbear? Can't really explain that just yet because that requires us having, again, the next episode, which will be Sister Location. Oh, actually, I might do the books first. Okay, maybe the episode after that, but stick with me, because we're going to finally solve all these questions and figure out just what's going on here in our episode on Sister Location, and that's where all of these pieces from all these previous games start to really come together. And it's also where it's one of my favorite games in the series, better than all of these previous ones, in my opinion. So, as always, I'm going to have to leave a couple dangling threads here, but I hope you'll stick with me. We've solved a fair amount here. We are introduced to a new protagonist of this series, and where his story goes remains to be seen. What these animatronics mean remains to be seen. Who Fredbear is remains to be seen. Who his brother is remains to be seen. Okay, a lot of loose ends. But we'll get there. Stick with it, because it's exciting. But now we're going to move on to the second part of the video, which is Mysteries for Older Fans. And now I finally get to talk about some of the really controversial stuff about this game. I mentioned in the last episode that this is where the stuff for older fans really starts to show up. And it does, so let's get to that, shall we? So first of all, older fans will probably know we still don't have the best idea of who this kid is. We have a much better idea, but there's still a couple things that are up in the air. So obviously he's connected to Golden Freddy, which means he may be the one who possesses Golden Freddy, which is why if his brother, Michael Afton, is really the one who's the security guard in all these games, it would explain why he says, "It's me." But then there's some other things that really kind of put holes in that theory of him being Golden Freddy. For instance, the fact that Scott just keeps mentioning Cassidy, man. I mean, first in the survival logbook, then in the fourth closet, and now even he had plans for a whole movie about Cassidy. So it's clear Cassidy is not, the bite victim is not Golden Freddy. That's Cassidy. But as MatPat pointed out in a new theory, it could be both of them. There could be two souls in Golden Freddy, which is my personal favorite theory now. But that's, I don't know, it's still a bit odd because we've never had that before, and it's extremely confusing. And I doubt it's what Scott intended in the start, so it's a bit shaky. We're not entirely sure, but this kid definitely is tied to Golden Freddy. As I said in the first part of the video, I'm of the mind that these animatronics are not real, because, as I mentioned, stuff like Nightmare Fredbear's head appearing on your bed, but none of his body, or Foxy literally turning into a plushie. Stuff like that just does not make sense if they're real animatronics, no matter how sci-fi this series is already becoming. And so there's still people who think that they're real animatronics. I'll always denounce that unless I'm proven wrong, because it just, with those details, it doesn't make sense, and I haven't really seen any concrete evidence to support them being real. One thing people will say is Nightmare Fredbear makes an appearance in the Survival Logbook and FNAF VR. Noticeably, though, he doesn't. None of the other Nightmare animatronics ever show up, for one. And I'll admit that is a bit fishy, like how he shows up in these other works after this, especially FNAF VR, where, like, because if he's just in the Crying Child's brain, then how does anybody else know what Nightmare Fredbear looks like? And for that matter, how does Michael know if he is the one using the survival logbook? Now, the thing I will say about this is that it also would make sense if the FNAF 4 animatronics never show up again, because that's the other alternative, right? Either you have them show up in later games, and then it's confusing, or you don't have them show up ever again, and then people wish they saw the Nightmare animatronics more. I feel like the reason Nightmare Fredbear shows up is because people just want to see him. They like the Nightmare animatronics. It doesn't quite fit with the lore, but it's a very small detail, one that we've noticed and latched onto for sure. The fact that people somehow know that he exists, even though the Crying Child is dead. But I don't think it really matters. I think that it's just Scott saying, hey, he's a really cool character, let's put him in this game. Who cares if it doesn't make sense that he's there? Very few people will notice it, and in the end it doesn't really... It's a minute plot hole. I feel like that's just it, but it does make me question, like, well, what if the Nightmare animatronics are real? But I still don't think so. So I mentioned in the first part of the video, the Crying Child and Michael's sister, who is Elizabeth, who gets, scooped up by Circus Baby, and then becomes Circus Baby. And I thought this was a really interesting detail from Scott, but it's one that has a few plot holes. Because FNAF 4 was meant to be the final chapter, right? I think we can all agree on that. It's called the final chapter, and Scott just kind of rebooted the series, so to speak, and added a few more games onto it to kind of tie up some loose ends. What I find really odd about that is, because it's the final chapter, why would he add that little detail of a sister's room? A sister who never shows up, and who... Because it's not like... Because if the series was intended to be over, I really doubt he would have intended, okay, I'll put Elizabeth's room here, to hint that she's the Crying Child's sister. He wouldn't do that because Elizabeth wasn't meant to exist at this point. What I think the answer to this is maybe he just thought, oh yeah, he has a sister, and she just never shows up. And then later on, when he made Sister Location, he decided, oh yeah, and that sister is going to be Circus Baby. And maybe at the time of FNAF 4, she was just meant to be his sister who never shows up. I hope I'm making sense here. I'm kind of rambling, but I hope that what I'm saying makes sense. Basically what I'm saying is, Elizabeth wasn't meant to be a character at FNAF 4's time, because it was meant to be the last game. But what he probably did is he added her in later because he remembered that he had made the Crying Child have a sister, and she just never shows up. And so he decided to run with that and make her, dead. Oh, can I mention something? Something really cool that I noticed recently? In the maintenance room, in one of the FNAF 4 minigames, you see Spring Bonnie's head, only it doesn't look like any Spring Bonnie head we've seen before. It actually looks a lot like Glitch Trap's head, which I think is a really cool detail. I don't know if it's unintentional or if it's intentional, but I like to think that it's intentional, and Scott was just like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if that was actually a character, if we actually saw a really creepy 3D version of that, because they look, like, you have to admit, there's a really uncanny similarity there. They look pretty similar. I think I have, like, 2 more things I'd like to talk about for this game. First is the box. I teased it at the start of this video, which is a clip I'm really proud of, by the way. It didn't take much editing, but it was fun to make. But the box is something that I was hoping to solve in this video, but I still really don't have much of a clue what it is. Scott talked about it in his interview. He said the contents of the box have changed over the years, and I think that as I mentioned before, is something that he's done with a lot of things in this series. It seems like he's changed the meaning of a lot of things a lot in this series. I think the Golden Freddy has probably been multiple people, and then he thought, oh, maybe this kid, and then he thought, oh, maybe this kid, now it's 2 kids. I think that a lot of things in this series have changed over time, and he hasn't always had a concrete answer for everything. Like I said with Elizabeth, I don't think Elizabeth was ever meant to exist. I think that sister's room was just meant to be kind of there. And I think the box, as for what it is now, I don't think he's forgotten it. I think that it's... Because what MatPat said in one of his theories, he said, oh, it's probably the FNAF 6 pizzeria. That I could totally see, but I'm still starting to lean towards the fact that it may be just a metaphor. But I'm starting to wonder if Scott has just kind of... if he's just not using the box anymore. I feel like he's kind of stopped giving it meanings. I feel like what may have happened is he's kind of... either it is the FNAF 6 pizzeria, or he's just decided that, you know what, the box was something that I had a solution for, but the series has gone on, and I decided, no, we don't need the box anymore. I've decided to take the series in a different direction. What I'm hoping for, and my dream for this series, is one day Scott just releases a book with all of the lore answers in there, all of the questions we've ever had. And he just, way when the series is over, and he just answers everything for us. That would make this series completely pointless, obviously, but I would love to see it. And maybe then he would explain, you know, what the box originally meant, what it means now, if anything. Or if he has just kind of decided that it's not relevant to where he's decided to take the series since then. But yeah, honestly, that's all I have to talk about for this game. For the next episode, I think we're going to be going through the first series of books, the original trilogy, which I'm really excited to go through because I have some really fascinating things to talk about for that series, stuff that I haven't noticed until now, and I'm really excited to talk through it with you guys. So, that's all for now. Thank you guys for watching once again. This series has received a lot of support, and I'm really thankful for it. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.